Hi and welcome to my video on pouring mediums part 2. In this video, I'll be talking to you in depth about different pouring mediums that's available out there in the market. The price, the color, trace, consistency and their speciality. Now let's start off with glue as a pouring medium, and as you've seen my previous video, you must be familiar with Elmer's Glue All. Elmer's Glue All is the cheapest pouring medium that you can find out there in the market. All you have to do is mix it with water to make your own pouring medium. The best thing about Elmer's Glue All is the price, so it's a very good medium for beginners. A gallon of Elmer's Glue All will just cost you around $14.98, which is approximately 11 cents per ounce. Now let's talk about trace and color. PVC glue or Elmer's Glue All looks bright white when it's wet, and it almost always dries clear. This is the trace of my pouring medium. I mixed 40% water to 60% glue. It's quite runny and it gives me a good flow rate and coverage across the canvas. There's another advantage of working with Elmer's Glue All. It's that when you work on your project, you don't have to worry about your paints drying in the cup before you finish your pour. You can mix your paints and medium very well in advance and it will not dry on you. For example, take this cup. I left this cup with Elmer's Glue All as a pouring medium out there in the open for around 5 to 6 hours. As you can see, it's still runny. It didn't turn hard, it didn't dry, and it didn't coagulate. So you have a lot of working time when you use Elmer's Glue All as a pouring medium. Next we move on to Floetrol. Now Floetrol is known as flood Floetrol in the United States. It's known as Australian Floetrol in Australia, and it is known as Overtrol in the United Kingdom. The best part about Floetrol is that it gives wonderful cells and lacing effects. Amongst Overtrol, flood Floetrol and Australian Floetrol, the Australian Floetrol is known to give the maximum amount of cells. Now the Australian Floetrol is not available in the United States unless you buy it from Jerry's, Artarama or eBay. Let's talk about pricing. So 1 quart of American flood Floetrol will cost you around $6.99, which is roughly 21 cents per ounce. But if you buy a gallon of flood Floetrol, it'll cost you approximately around $22, which works out to 17 cents per ounce. Now let's talk about color and trace. This cup here has around 2 ounces of flood Floetrol. If you look at the color, it's white, but it's not as bright as Elmer's Glue All. And if you look at the trace, it is slightly thicker than your Elmer's Glue All or homemade pouring medium. But you gotta remember one thing though, flood Floetrol is the only medium amongst all the popular brands in the market that dries matte and not gloss. Now when you use flood Floetrol, I would always recommend that you buy a pair of pantyhose or nylon stockings from the dollar store. Now the reason for this is because flood Floetrol sometimes tends to get coagulated when left in storage for a long time. I'm going to show you a small experiment. Now I have some flood Floetrol here that's been in my cupboard for like 4 or 5 months. If you see when I stir it, you can find lumps. These lumps are bad for your pores. I'll tell you why. Because when you mix your paint in this Floetrol, what happens is the paint and the floetrol does not mix properly together. And if you do that and make your pour, lumps of floetrol will be on top of your canvas, and then you have to use a pair of tweezers to remove those lumps off. And when you do that, your pour will get spoiled. Which is why these come in handy. And I'll show you how. Take the pantyhose or the stocking and put it on top of your container like this. And then pour your floetrol on top of the stockings. This way, what happens is you get perfect runny floetrol in your container, which is ready to be mixed with paint for your pours, and all the sticky lumps like this gets left behind on the stockings. The best part about this pantyhose is that it's reusable. You just have to remove it, wash it and dry it, and then it's good to go. You can use it again. I just washed the stockings and you can see the lumps even more clearly. This is the only disadvantage of working with flood floetrol. Next we move on to Liquitex pouring medium. Now Liquitex pouring medium is the second most expensive pouring medium out there in the market. Liquitex pouring mediums gives you beautiful marbling effects. Liquitex pouring mediums are not known for their cells though. When we talk about pricing, 16 ounces of Liquitex pouring medium will cost you around $16, which is around $1 per ounce. A quart of Liquitex pouring medium will cost you around $32. It will cost you approximately $1 per fluid ounce again, even if you buy a quart. But if you buy a gallon of Liquitex pouring medium, which is around 128 fluid ounces, it will cost you around 50 cents per fluid ounce. Now let's talk about color and trace. Liquitex pouring medium is one of the glossiest pouring mediums available in the market. If you can see the color, it's white, but it's almost transparent. Just look at it. And even look at the trace. It's the runniest trace amongst all the pouring medium. Even though it's white and it's almost transparent, it dries completely clear. There is a reason why Liquitex pouring medium is also known as Liquitex Professional Pouring Medium. When it dries, it almost gives you a resin art finish, and it's so glossy that sometimes you won't even need to varnish your pours once it dries. The only disadvantage of Liquitex pouring medium is that you cannot prep way ahead in advance. As I showed you, if you look at Elmer's glue all, I left it out for 5 hours and it is still runny. If you look at flood floetrol, it is thickening up more than the Elmer's glue all, but it is still quite runny even after being in the cup out in the open for 5 hours. But if you look at the Liquitex pouring medium, it's dry. Can you see? It's totally dry. It's dry, thick and coagulated. This has been out for 5 to 6 hours. And this is the result. So the thing with Liquitex pouring medium is that you have to mix your paint and pouring medium right before you do the pour. You cannot mix it in advance and leave it out and come back later to do your pour, because you don't have too much of a working time while using Liquitex pouring medium. Next we move on to GAC or GAC 800 by Golden. Now this is not a pouring medium, Golden has its own brand of pouring medium known as golden pouring medium. A lot of people confuse GAC 800 with golden pouring medium. Now GAC 800 and golden pouring medium is almost the same except for the fact that GAC 800 is an additive. We add it to homemade pouring mediums or other pouring mediums in order to prevent cracking or crazing of paints. As you can see, it is an extender or an additive for low crazing and cracking of paints. GAC 800 and golden pouring medium are the most expensive pouring medium out there in the market. But the benefits of buying GAC 800 is that when you mix it with your homemade pouring medium, all you need is just a few drops of it to give you brilliant pours without cracking or crazing. So an 8 ounce bottle of GAC 800 will go a long way. When we talk about pricing, 8 ounces of GAC 800 cost you around $16, which is around $2 per fluid ounce. A gallon of GAC 800 will cost you around $65 at Blix, which works out to around 50 cents per fluid ounce. If you go to Jerry's Artarama, the same gallon of GAC 800 will cost you around $70, which works to around 54 cents per fluid ounce. It is easy to find 8 ounce bottles of GAC 800 on Amazon. But if you want a gallon of GAC 800, you cannot find it on Amazon or at any of your local art store like Michael's or Hobby Lobby. You have to order it online from Blix or Jerry's Artarama. Just like GAC 800, golden pouring medium also costs around $65 for a gallon. And it is available only at Blix. It works out to around 50 cents per fluid ounce. Now I don't have golden pouring medium with me in my art studio. So for the sake of this video, I will be substituting golden pouring medium with GAC 800 as a pouring medium. Now I left some GAC 800 in a cup for 5 hours to see how it dries. It has thickened a lot and I can also see lumps, and the GAC 800 has dried around my cup. It is not as bad as the Liquitex, but it definitely does not give you a long time to prep in advance. Next we move on to a very controversial medium. This is actually not a medium, but it is polyurethane. This is by the brand Varathane. Varathane triple thick polyurethane. And when you buy this, make sure that it is water based and not oil based, and make sure you get clear gloss. When we talk about pricing, this medium is quite expensive. 1 quart of Varathane triple thick polyurethane cost me around $18.97, which approximately works out to 59 cents per fluid ounce. You can buy it off Amazon, but if you go to Home Depot, you might even get it for a cheaper price. Now let's talk about color, consistency and trace. If you look at it, the polyurethane is off-white in color and it is really thick, but it's got a very good trace and flow rate. I'm actually pretty excited to work with this medium today and I cannot wait to see the results. Now just like all the other pouring mediums out there, I left a little bit of polyurethane in a cup for 5 hours. And now let's see how it is. It is thick and it has coagulated. There are a lot of lumps. So what I observed is that it's very similar to Liquitex pouring medium and GAC 800. You don't have much of a work time over here. You cannot prep in advance. If you do so, it'll become thick and sticky and it'll not flow. Now in order to show you all how each and every pouring medium looks like when it's dry, I left spots of pouring medium on my silicone mat overnight for it to dry, and these are the dried results. Now first let's talk about Elmer's glue all. This is how Elmer's glue all dries. It doesn't look completely clear, but that's only because I put on too much of layers of Elmer's glue all on top of each other and left it out to dry. Normally it dries even more clear than this. Another observation about Elmer's glue all is that it is quite brittle. You can see that it's quite hard. See? So in order to prevent your painting from cracking over a period of time, you have to make sure that you make a good coat of varnish on top of it, or an art resin finish. Next we talk about floetrol. Now look at this. It is almost transparent, but as you can see, it has not dried gloss, it has dried matte. It's quite papery and it's not hard or brittle like the Elmer's glue all. And it stretches too. So I can assure you that this would make your painting last a long time. This is how Liquitex pouring medium dries. Totally clear, and it is so glossy and smooth. It doesn't stretch, it doesn't tear, or it doesn't form any sort of wrinkles. It almost has a latex or leathery feel to it. This is your GAC 800. This has dried glossy too, and even more clear than the Liquitex pouring medium. It's not as hard as the other pouring mediums, and it's definitely softer than the Liquitex, and it is stretching. This too has an art resin kind of a finish or a leathery texture to it. And finally we have the Varathane triple thick polyurethane. As you can see, it has dried yellow. Now this too has a leathery art resin like finish to it. Now since this has dried yellow, I am sure that over a period of time your painting too would turn yellower. So I'm definitely sure that you would need a lot of varnish or an art resin finish to prevent more yellowing of your pour. Now I conducted a string of experiments off camera to see how different pouring mediums react with paint over the canvas. In order to compare apples to apples, I've used the paint to pouring medium in a ratio of 1:4 across the board. I did a flip cup pour for all the canvases, and I layered the paint in the cups in the same way across the board. I sandwiched an opaque color in between two semi-transparent colors, and I used magenta by Cali Art, cerulean blue by Cali Art, and monster green by Cali Art. The cerulean blue is the opaque color, and the magenta and the monster green are semi-transparent. For these 5 canvases, I did not use any silicone oil, but for these 5 over here, I've used silicone oil. I've used Academic Level 1 silicone oil by Artist Loft. I added 2 drops of silicone oil in each cup for my 5 pours over here. Now let's talk about observation. I start off with Elmer's glue all. So I used Elmer's glue all to make a homemade pouring medium. And for this experiment, I used Elmer's glue all and water in the ratio of 1:4, where I added 1 part water to 4 parts of Elmer's glue all. Personally, when I look at all the canvases, I feel that Elmer's glue all or the homemade pouring medium gave me one of the best results. For example, if you take this, I did not add any silicone oil to this, but it's given me a splatter of so many beautiful cells. The colors look so bright and vivid. Even though green is a semi-transparent paint, it pops up. beautifully instead of just getting submerged or muddied in the background. Now in this canvas over here, I've used silicone oil. But what I observed was the one without the silicone oil gave me more cells than the one with silicone oil. Now when we talk about color and opacity and transparency, even opaque color turns semi-transparent when mixed with pouring mediums. So semi-transparent colors turn even more transparent. So one thing that I observed across the board was most of the mediums didn't work well with my magenta. Now let's talk about flood floatrol. This is the result without silicone oil on it, and this is the result with silicone oil on it. Now if you compare the two, I do not see any cells in this one at all. Yes, I did not use silicone oil, but still Floetrol is known to give you cells without silicone oil. Whereas over here, I have a lot of cells, a splatter of cells across my canvas. These are so tiny, like you have to really look at it up close in order to see the individual cells all around. In terms of colors and mixing, I'm not too happy with the way the colors look on my canvas. They do not look bright or vivid. I guess that's because Floetrol probably makes the color even more transparent than it is, which is why you cannot see any color popping up individually. Again, I do not see hints of pink anywhere in my canvas, but I can see some purple. Next, I move on to Liquitex pouring medium. Wow, I must say that I was really impressed with Liquitex pouring medium. This is the one without silicone oil. And this is the one with silicone oil. Now, Liquitex pouring medium is generally not known for its cells. It's known more for giving out beautiful marbling effects. But I was really surprised because I got a splatter of cells on my canvas. Like if you can see these pink cells all around, I was really impressed. And I also got two beautiful bigger cells over here. And the best part was the cells did not stretch as the painting dried. Moreover, the best part about Liquitex is that you can see the pink color shining individually. It did not dilute the color or make it even more transparent or semi-transparent than it is. The pink is actually visible on the canvas, and the design is just brilliant. It's got such a beautiful glossy finish. The one with silicone oil, wow, I was really impressed with the effects that I got. Just look at it. It's got beautiful cells and lacing, and the best part was again the cells did not stretch as it dried. Again, the pink is not visible. The pink turned purple, but you can see hints of green. The semi-transparent colors, like for example, look at the green, it is visible but not in a very dark way or in a very garish way. It looks subtle and beautiful, and the pink turned purple, which did wonders to this pour. Considering the fact that the blue was an opaque color, it showed up beautifully all over the canvas. I'm pretty impressed, I must say, with Liquitex pouring medium. Now, if you compare the Liquitex pouring medium with the Floetrol or the homemade pouring medium, you can see that this has got an almost art resin finish to it. You can see that it is quite leathery to touch. It feels like you're touching latex or leather. Let's talk about GAC 800. This is the pour without silicone oil and this is the pour with silicone oil in it. Now if you look at it, I did not get any cells in this except for one or two spots here and there. But if you look at the pour, it's beautiful. The colors are dispersed beautifully across the canvas. This sort of reminds me of the Aurora Borealis. Now if you compare this with Flood Floetrol, the Flood Floetrol almost has a sort of holographic effect to it, but this does not. You can see the colors brightly and vividly spread across the canvas. The pinks are visible, there's purple, there's violet, there's blue, the greens. It just looks amazing on the canvas. And it's pretty glossy too. And now this one over here, this is GAC 800 with silicone oil in it. And I am amazed with the results. I am in love with this pour. I do not have cells per se because they stretched as the painting dried, but the effect is incredible nonetheless. The colors are bright and vivid throughout the pour. And parts of pink is visible here and there. This again has a very glossy finish and it feels like leather or latex. It doesn't feel like an acrylic pour on the canvas. It's very similar to Liquitex pouring medium. Now we finally move on to Varathane Triple Tick Polyurethane. Personally, I really loved it because this gave me the glossiest finish of all, especially this one without silicone oil in it. And the colors are beautiful and vivid, and you can see purple, you can see pink individually all across the canvas. You can see the greens, you can see that they were mixed together and formed new colors, but at the same time you can see that the colors also pop out individually. There isn't muddying or clouding over here, and the finish is beautiful. It's so glossy that I don't think I would need a coat of varnish or art resin to make my colors pop even more, because it's very glossy as it is. I love this pour. It looks like a beautiful coral reef under the sea. Now this one though, I added silicone oil to it, and the moment I added silicone oil, once my pour dried, it turned yellow. You can see a yellow sheen all across my painting. And it did affect each color individually. All the colors in the canvas has a warm tone to it because of the yellow from the polyurethane. And if you notice, I did not get a single cell even though I added silicone oil, not one single cell. But I guess because polyurethane, the one that I used is water based, I guess silicone oil didn't work well with this medium. And for some reason I believe that it is a cause for making the colors look warmer across the canvas. You would notice that Elmer's glue oil, despite being the cheapest pouring medium available in the market, gives you one of the best results and the best cells too, even more so than Floetrol. The Floetrol has dried completely matte compared to everything else. Overall, Compared to all the other pouring mediums out here, I feel Liquitex Professional Pouring Medium has given me the best results without silicone oil and with silicone oil. I would rate Liquitex Professional Pouring Medium as the number one. The Varathane without the silicone oil, GAC 800 with silicone oil, both the Liquitex with and without silicone oil, and Elmer's Glue All without silicone oil is my most favorite pores amongst all. Now, my least favorite pouring medium that I worked with was the Flood Floetrol. I wasn't impressed at all. One thing about Flood Floetrol though, it is not exactly a medium. We use it as a medium in order to do pour painting, but it is not a medium. It is actually a paint conditioner for latex paints. Now, latex paints are very similar to your acrylic paint, but these are paints that are used to paint the surface of the walls of your house. Now, they use Flood Floetrol as a conditioner while painting houses with latex based paint is because it helps with the consistency of the latex paint. And Flood Floetrol is self-leveling, which is why they use it while painting houses. It is good for acrylic pour too because it is self-leveling. As you can see, there are no ridges or bumps across the canvas. Now, similar to Flood Floetrol, even the Varathane triple thick polyurethane is self-leveling. So folks, now we move on to part 2 of our experiment with pouring mediums of different brands and how they react with paint across the canvas. So for this experiment, I've used 1 opaque paint and 2 transparent paint. I've used cobalt blue as the opaque paint for this experiment. And then I've used orange by Cali Art, which is a semi-transparent paint. And finally, I used purple by Cali Art, which is another semi-transparent paint. So in order to compare apples to apples, I've sandwiched the opaque paint, which is the cobalt blue, in between the orange and the purple. And I've poured it in the same order for all the cups for all my pours. So the difference between this experiment and the previous experiment that I conducted is that in this experiment I used the paint to pouring medium in a ratio of 1:3, whereas in those pours in that experiment I've used the paint to pouring medium in a ratio of 1:4. Now since I've used the paint to pouring medium in a 1:3 ratio over here, I get a slightly thicker pour, and this kind of a consistency is good for swipes. You can also use this for ring pours or your flip cup pours, but I wouldn't recommend this consistency for Dutch pours. Now the sample over here is just the paint and pouring medium alone without silicone oil, and these samples have silicone oil in them. Now let's talk about observation. So in this wipe, I've used Elmer's Glue All and water as a pouring medium. I've used 60% glue and 40% water. Now I actually made this board over here for another video on transparency, opacity of paints, and to show you how to mix paint and how not to mix paint, which is why you can see a lot of muddying over here. So kindly ignore that. So over here I have Elmer's Glue All and water as a pouring medium, and I got a very beautiful pour, but unfortunately the two transparent colors mixed together and muddied and became brown over here. But still, despite the fact that I used two transparent paints, I got a lot of orange and a lot of green. The purple, blue, but the purple is hardly visible. The purple turned brown. I didn't get any cells though. But if you look at this one over here, I got a lot of cells across my swatch. There is blue which is slightly visible, but most of the purple and the orange mixed together and turned muddy. Now actually my cells were spread all across my swatch, but since I poured it on the corner, It fell off the canvas and stretched as it dried. Now we move on to Floetrol. This swatch over here does not have silicone oil, and this swatch over here has silicone oil. So if you look closely, you can see marvelous marbling effects. The purple is quite visible in this one, unlike the one with Floetrol. There is slight muddying, and the orange does pop out slightly, but not very bright or individually. The whole swatch looks cloudy, but I wouldn't blame it just on the paints alone. Floetrol does have that kind of an effect, you know. Now, if you look at the swatch with silicone oil on it, you can see that I've got beautiful lacing effects. It's not that visible because of my choice of colors, but it's definitely given me cells and a lot of lacing effects. I guess Floetrol works better when you mix less of Floetrol and more of paint, like in the ratio of 1:3, like I did over here, to get cells and lacing. Next, I want to talk to you about Liquitex Professional Acrylic Medium. This one does not have silicone oil in it, and this one has silicone oil in it. Now, if you look at it closely, this is beautiful. Like, even though the choice of colors are dark, there isn't clouding, there isn't muddying, and I've got a beautiful marbling effect, and it's got amazing sheen and gloss. And even when you touch it, it's got a nice latex or leathery kind of feel to it. And all three colors shine individually. You can see the blue, you can see the purple, you can see the orange, and also a lot of browns. Even though you see the brown, it doesn't look as bad as how it looks with the Floetrol or the Elmer's Glue All. But when I added silicone oil to it, I did not get any cells at all. I got a mess over here, a cloudy, muddy mess. And on top of that, I got air bubbles all over. I popped them with the blowtorch, but still I got stuck with air bubbles that didn't pop and turned into pits on the canvas. I guess 1:3 consistency does not work with Liquitex. I think a 1:4 consistency is a much better option when you use Liquitex, which is 1 part paint to 4 parts medium rather than 1 part paint to 3 parts of medium. Next we move on to GAC 800. Now this is the one without silicone oil, and this is the one with silicone oil. Now this swatch over here without the silicone oil, it gave me a marbling effect. I don't see any cells at all. But then there is a lot of clouding and muddying. The purple and the blue are hardly visible together. They've grown so dark, and the purple and the orange has turned brown. It's given me very similar effect to the Floetrol and the Glue All. Now if you look at the same GAC 800 with silicone oil in it, it's given me beautiful effects. I just love this swatch. It's given me so many pretty cells and beautiful effects, and they did not stretch as they dried. And the design is really pretty. I just love this swatch. I think the GAC 800 works really well when you use it in the ratio of 1:3 and when you use silicone oil. Everything just works beautifully well together. Finally, we move on to Varathane Triple Tech Polyurethane. Now this impressed me a lot. I loved it as much as I loved the Liquitex Professional Acrylic Medium. This is the swatch without silicone oil, and this is the swatch with silicone oil. Now amongst all these mediums, I have used only the medium and paint for Flood Floetrol, Liquitex and GAC 800. But Elmer's glue, I had to mix water. Like for 60% glue, I mixed 40% water. Similarly, for Varathane Triple Tech Polyurethane, I had to mix water. Now the polyurethane worked by itself when I used it in a ratio of 1 part paint and 4 part medium. But when I used it in the ratio of 1 part paint to 3 part polyurethane, it did not work at all. It was so thick, it just refused to even flow out of the cup. So similar to Elmer's glue all, I had to mix some water for this particular ratio of 1 is to 3. Now mind you, when I say I mixed water, it doesn't mean that I mixed loads of water. Just few drops of water did the trick. For example, all I did was take this dropper, took some water and started putting drops of water into my cup. I think I added 5 drops of water for 1 ounce of polyurethane. Now let's have a close up. If you look at it, it is so smooth and beautiful. I did not use any silicone oil in this swatch and I did not get any cells, which is as expected. All 3 colors are visible individually. I can see the orange, I can see the purple streaks, and I can also see the cobalt blue. Orange and purple mixed together and gave me brown streaks, which is really nice. Now it certainly looks cloudy, but it definitely is not muddy like the Floetrol or the Elmer's glue all. I also like the sheen and the feel of it. It's got quite a glossy look to it. Now we know that the polyurethane dries yellow, but I don't see any yellowing at all. The colors are just fantastic. Over here in this swatch, I've used silicone oil with the polyurethane, and trust me, I got beautiful cells. There were so many beautiful cells all across the canvas, and they were bright and prominent and round. The only issue was, just like over here, since I poured it on the edge of the canvas, as the paint dried, the cells stretched and the paint dripped off the sides of the canvas, which is why the cells stretched. I'm pretty sure had I done the pour in the center of the canvas or on a mid-sized canvas, it would have just dried as it is. It wouldn't have dripped over the canvas and stretched like over here. There is one thing that sets apart Floetrol and Varathane triple thick polyurethane from the rest of the mediums. It is the fact that Floetrol and the polyurethane is self-leveling, which is why you can see that it's just been absorbed into the canvas in a very smooth fashion. You don't see any ridges or bumps. Whereas Liquitex, the gag and the glue all is not self-leveling. If you want to know what exactly ridges and bumps are, let me show you. Now if you look closely over here on the white part of the canvas, you can see bumps. You can see that it is slightly raised from the surface. Unlike the Varathane or the Floetrol, which is completely flat. It aligns with the surface of the canvas, but you can see bumps over here. This is because this is not self-leveling, whereas this is self-leveling, so it levels beautifully with the canvas. And also the GAC 800, if you observe closely, you can see small ridges and bumps. This is because these are not self-leveling. If I have to pick top 2, I would pick Liquitex without silicone oil and GAC 800 with silicone oil. Now this concludes my video on pouring medium for beginners. I have 2 more videos coming up on pouring mediums. Pouring medium for intermediate learners and pouring medium for advanced learners, where I'll be teaching you various other techniques on how to mix and match different pouring mediums. If you found this video to be informative, please click on like and subscribe. Share this with your friends and family, and stay tuned for my future videos. Bye.